All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Walton, and I am the event and program manager for the Tompkins Chamber of Commerce. We're really excited today to bring you another Learn workshop. Today, the Chamber has very excitedly partnered with the Chamber Alliance of New York State and Ithaca Area Economic Development to co host today's Learn webinar on New York State COVID-19 pandemic small business recovery grants. During our webinar today, our presenter, Mr. Matthew Kennedy, who is an economic development program specialist with Empire State Development, will explain eligibility and documentation requirements for this program and answer any questions you might have about the opportunity to apply. Before I turn things over to Matthew, I do just want to say thank you and a huge shout out to our sponsor for the Learn series, Tompkins Trust Company. Without them, we wouldn't be able to offer the great information that we do through this series. I want to say to all of our attendees with us today, if at any point you have a question that you would like to ask to Matthew, feel free to use the chat feature. That way, if something comes up during the presentation and you don't want to forget it, you can log it right there in the chat. We will have time for Q&A at the end, and today's session is being recorded and will be made available on the Chamber's website as well as the Chamber's YouTube channel. So without further ado, because we have a ton of information to get to today, I will turn things over to Mr. Matthew Kennedy, and Matt will get us started with today's presentation.
Hello, everyone. Yes, my name is Matthew Kennedy. I am from Empire State Development's Division for Small Business and Technology Development. I am on the Access to Capital team. And one of the things the Access to Capital team does is we specifically have loan programs, grant programs for small businesses. We've been working on the New York State COVID-19 Pandemic Small Business Recovery Grant Program for the last several months, getting it ready to roll out, and applications are open now. So what I'm going to go over today is actually a program and application guide that is available on our website or on the recovery website where you go to apply. And this application guide, so you know, has actually been translated into 13 different languages. So it is available in multiple languages. There's a great deal of information in it. Some of it I'm going to go over very quickly because it gets a little technical, and it's really for a situation where you're in front of your computer actually applying. But I'm going to walk through this. One thing I will do is I am going to pause my camera, because it seems like what happens with my camera with the slides is sometimes it causes a bandwidth problem. I want to make sure everyone can hear me and see the slides. So I'll pause my camera and I'll restart it when we get to the end. So everyone should still be able to hear me. So I hope so. We'll start out. So the COVID-19, the New York State COVID-19 Pandemic Small Business Recovery Grant Program is created to allow flexible grant assistance to viable small businesses, microbusinesses, and for-profit independent arts and cultural organizations in New York State that have experienced a hardship due to COVID-19. Now, the website for this program is open right now, and this is where you apply: www.nysmallbusinessrecovery, all one word, .com. That information is also available on our website. If you go to the ESD website, it will link you straight to that particular application site. So this is specifically for for-profit businesses, for-profit small businesses. And of course, everyone wants to know how grant awards are calculated and what kind of grants they can get. Well, grant awards are calculated based upon a business's annual gross receipts for the year 2019. So for a small business with annual gross receipts between $25,000 and $50,000, it's a $5,000 per business grant. It's a flat grant of $5,000. For businesses with annual gross receipts between $50,000 and $100,000, again, it's a $10,000 flat grant per small business. And then for businesses with annual gross receipts between $100,000 and $500,000, it's 10% of those gross receipts, up to a maximum grant of $50,000. We'll talk a little bit more about how gross receipts are calculated and where it comes from. It's actually reported on your 2019 tax returns, which is one of the documents that we collect as part of the verification of your eligibility for the grant. So, but before we get too deep into the conversation, I want to point out make a couple definitions so you understand what I'm mentioning when I say these words. So a small business, for our purposes of this program, a small business is a business that's been incorporated in New York State, it's registered in New York State, licensed to operate in New York State. It's not dominant in its field and has 100 or fewer employees. So for our purposes, a small business has 100 or fewer employees. A micro business is very similar to a small business. Again, it's going to be incorporated in the state of New York, licensed and registered to do business in the state of New York, and independently owned and operated, but it's not fewer than 10 employees. A lot of the businesses that will apply for this program will probably be micro businesses more than small businesses. When I mentioned for-profit independent arts and cultural organizations, that is specifically essentially small businesses with 100 or fewer full-time employees. However, they are allowed to have seasonal employees in excess of the 100 employees. And those types of qualifying organizations would be organizations involved in dance and design and film and music, theater, maybe visual arts, folk arts, museums, literature, that sort of thing. All the different arts businesses. And finally, COVID-19 health and safety protocols or any of the restrictions that were imposed as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly those from Executive Order 202 that was issued by the governor. So an eligible small business, micro business, or for-profit independent arts and cultural organization has to be currently viable, does have to currently be open, can't be permanently closed due to COVID. And it must have begun operation on or before March 1st, 2019. So the business needed to be in operation 1 year prior to the COVID pandemic and continue to be in operation as of the date of the application. So you do need, again, you do need to be operating at this point in time. And eligible applicants are required to show a loss of gross receipts as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and compliance with the COVID-19 health and safety protocols, of course. So what businesses qualify? What is the size of the businesses that qualify? Well, small businesses and micro businesses must have 2019 or 2020 gross receipts between $25,000 and $500,000 per year as reported on their tax returns. So the place to find that on your tax return for a corporation that would file an 1120 or a partnership would file a 1065, it's going to be line 1A. For a sole proprietorship that uses a Schedule C on a 1040 form, that's going to be line 1. It's not on the slide, but if you have a farm, if you are a farm and you use a Schedule F, if you're a sole proprietor farm that uses a Schedule F, it's actually line 1A plus line 2 added together. And I want to also point out that you'll see this as gross receipts for 2019 or 2020. Now, also, you must be able to demonstrate positive net profit in 2019 on your business return. So one of the gauges for viability is that the business prior to COVID, the for-profit business was profitable. It needs to only show $1 in profit, but it does have to show at least $1 in profit. That's going to be line 28 on the IRS Form 1120, line 22 on the 1065, line 31 on the 1040 Schedule C. I do believe it's 34 on a Schedule F. But it does have to show $1, at least $1 of positive profit prior to the COVID outbreak for 2019. Also, you need to be able to demonstrate at least a 25% loss in annual gross receipts year over year in a direct comparison between 2020 and 2019. So the example here would be a business that had $500,000 in receipts in 2019, has only $250,000 in receipts in 2020. They're going to qualify. That's a 50% loss in gross receipts. They'll qualify for the grant. I also want to mention that you do not have to have gross receipts in both years that are inside those thresholds. So let's say we had a business that was in 2019 $1 million gross receipt business. The business had $1 million in gross receipts. And in 2020, due to COVID, they only had $300,000 in gross receipts. It was a very large reduction. That business could qualify for the grant because their 2020 gross receipts are inside that window, that 25,000 to 500,000 window. And $1 million in gross receipts versus 300,000 will be a 70% reduction. So they would be able to demonstrate the loss in gross receipts. So they could apply. Finally, you do need to also demonstrate that your total expenses on your 2020 business income return are greater than the grant you qualify for. So in this particular case, these grants are actually reimbursement grants for COVID expenses. And if on your tax return, for some reason, you couldn't show enough expenses, enough deductions from your profits, from your gross receipts to cover the amount of the grant, then obviously you must not have spent that much money on COVID supplies, COVID related expenses. Therefore, you wouldn't be able to qualify for the whole grant. This is probably going to be a very rare circumstance because typically a small business, from a gross receipts aspect, their actual expenses are going to run at least 60 to 65% of their gross receipts. So that would need to be a business, even the smallest business with the largest possible percentage grant in this program, which would be a $25,000 gross receipt business receiving a $5,000 grant. That still would only be 20% of their gross receipts. So it's probably not something that anyone's really going to run into, but it is a requirement. Of course, your business does need to be in substantial compliance with applicable federal, state, and local laws, regulations, codes, and so forth. Example there would be that if you are a bar that has a liquor license, your liquor license needs to be valid. It can't be suspended. You shouldn't owe any federal, state, or local taxes prior to July 15th, 2020. However, if you do have a approved repayment plan or deferral plan or some other applicable agreement with the taxing body, taxing authority, then yes, you do qualify. So what they'll be collecting information regarding your payment plan to make sure that you're up to date on your payment plan. So if you have taxes in arrears prior to July 15th, 2020, it is possible still to qualify, but you need to show that you're currently actively trying to pay them back with your payment plan. Also, you have to have not been able to obtain sufficient business assistance from federal grant programs. So there are some federal grant programs that are, if you receive them, you are excluded from the program. For example, businesses need to have Paycheck Protection Program loans, have not received a Paycheck Protection Program loan of more than $100,000. So that it goes across all rounds of paycheck protection. As long as your business received no more than $100,000 in Paycheck Protection Program loans, you should qualify. And that, again, that is summed from rounds 1 and 2. Also, you could have received a COVID-19 EIDL advance grant of up to $10,000 or a COVID-19 EIDL supplemental targeted advance grant of up to $5,000. That really should cover anyone who received an EIDL grant should be eligible. I don't believe that the EIDL grant totals were ever allowed to get over those numbers. So if you received an EIDL grant, you should be eligible. Also, you may have received an SBA shuttered venue operator grant. Those are also allowed of any size. If you have a business that qualified to receive one and did receive one, that is allowed. So eligible applicants must provide evidence acceptable to New York State that you are operational and that you're not restricted by any of those mandates. Due to the limited amount of funding and the high volume of requests, your business type, geography, and industry may factor into your ability to receive a grant. So there may be a situation where if there's too much money going to one region or one area, it gets redirected to another region if it seems like it's out of proportion. Priority is going to be given to socially and economically disadvantaged business owners, which includes but are not limited to minority woman-owned business enterprises. They do not need to be New York State certified, by the way. Service disabled veteran-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, and businesses that are located in communities in economically distressed census tracts that were recorded as economically distressed prior to March 1st, 2020. So those applications are going to get priority in their processing. There are some businesses that are not eligible, so it's important to point out some of the ineligible businesses. So in this case, all nonprofits are ineligible. You do need to be a for-profit business to qualify. Churches and other religious institutions are not eligible. Government-owned entities and elected official offices are not eligible. Businesses primarily engaged in political and lobbying activities are not eligible. And this is an important factor here. Businesses that received awards from the SBA Restaurant Revitalization Grant Fund program are not eligible. The SBA Revitalization Grant for restaurants, if you had a qualifying business, you were lucky enough to get selected and lucky enough to receive one, those can be very generous grants. They were really intended to make up all your lost revenues. So those are specifically excluded from the program. If you did receive one, if you did receive those monies, you can't receive this grant. You can receive one or the other. If you applied and didn't qualify, or you applied and didn't receive the money, you can always apply for this program, but you can't receive both. Also, landlords and passive real estate income businesses are excluded from this program. There are other programs from other agencies that are for landlords. And of course, illegal businesses and enterprises are not allowed. Can't get a grant for your illegal business. So now we'll talk a little bit about the required documentation. This is the documentation we're going to be collecting for proof that you qualify. So first, for proof of your gross receipts or other loss, we're going to need your 2019 and 2020 business income tax returns. Those are the complete returns with all the attachments, all the schedules. We need everything. They are both required. If you haven't completed your 2020 business income tax return yet, we do need a completed filed 2020 business income tax return. So you'll want to complete that as soon as possible and get it filed, because we do need that information for this program. For corporations and LLCs, of course, that's going to be your Form 1120 or 1120S. Partnerships are going to use their 1065, their Form 1065s with their schedules, especially K1. Sole proprietors, their 1040 and their Schedule C. Sole proprietor farms, their 1040 and their Schedule F, so on and so forth. So, but we do need the full filed return, tax returns. Everything that you filed with it, you're going to want to include. Second, we may collect an IRS Form 4506C. Now, this form is not necessarily required. If you're selected or if there's a question about your tax information, we will request it. It'll be requested by L.E.A.R.N. And I want to point out here, this is important because I haven't mentioned this so far. We have partnered with an organization called L.E.A.R.N. L.E.A.R.N. is running our application portal, and L.E.A.R.N. is helping with the processing of these applications and the processing of these grants. So if you receive information or you receive emails from an organization called L.E.A.R.N., they are partners in this program. So it's important to not ignore those. L.E.A.R.N. is authorized by Empire State Development in the state of New York to communicate with you as a result or in the process of this particular grant. So back to what I was saying about your Form 4506C. If it is required, what will happen is the L.E.A.R.N. will reach out to you and they will send you a document to have you sign and then upload back into the portal. There are lines on a 4506C that need to be completed prior to you signing it. The document actually asks you not to sign a blank document, that need to be completed on the document to make sure that the transcript is going to the location that it's supposed to go to. So if you do have to fill one out, you'll be contacted. If you don't have to be concerned about it. It's only if L.E.A.R.N. determines that they need it because they can't determine things properly from your tax information that you submitted. We also need your proof of business location and current operation. So in that regard, we're going to be looking for two of the following documents. So any two of these: a current lease, a utility bill, a current business bank statement, a current business mortgage statement, a business credit card statement for your credit card that has the name of your business on it. Professional insurance bills will work. Payment processing statements. So if you have a credit card payment processor like a Square that is processing payments for your business, one of those statements will qualify. Obviously, that's going to show that you're in current operation if you've got a current statement of revenues coming in or receipts coming in. Or your New York State ST 809 or ST 100 sales tax collection documentation. That, of course, is if you're collecting sales tax. Those are the annual and quarterly reports that you have to file to show that you're collecting sales tax in the state of New York. Also, we'll be looking for a schedule of ownership for the business, who's a list, essentially a listing of names, addresses, social security numbers, or ITIN numbers and phone numbers and photo IDs for the owners of the business. Now, when you first apply, we only need one person to apply. So please only apply once per business. And when you go to complete the application for the grant, we do ask that it be an owner, someone who's at least 20% owner of the business. And that person will be the primary point of contact for the grant requests and for the grant information. We do need that person's identification at the time of application or the time of review. We do not require the identification for all of the other owners of the business that have at least 20% ownership until the time of funding. So what will happen is that when the funding time comes for the grant, there's another document that you download that you fill out. And at that point in time, you can upload that document along with the copies of the identification for each of those other owners, if it's necessary. If you're only one owner, that's not necessary. Number 5, we're going to need proof of your employees. So if you are an employer firm and you do have employees, this is to make sure you don't have more than 100 employees. It's fairly unlikely that you will, but to collect a proof of number of employees, we are looking for your most recently submitted New York State 45 document. Of course, that's going to be your New York State tax withholding document that shows your withholding tax for employees. That's going to have your number of employees on the top of it, actually. So we can use that as proof of your number of employees. And again, that's the most recently submitted document. For proof of your business organization, we will collect this. This is just prior to funding. We do need a document that shows that you're licensed to operate in New York State. So in that regard, we're only looking for one of these. It's going to be a business license, a current business certificate, a certificate of organization. It could be a certificate of assumed name, commonly called a DBA here in New York. New York State certificate of authority, which is to collect taxes. Typically, that's going to be posted at your cash register. Usually you have one on your wall. A lot of places will have them framed in a little frame by their cash register. Your articles of incorporation, if you can find them, or any other New York State municipality issued document showing authorization to operate in the state of New York. So it's a pretty broad category, but we do need one of those documents. And finally, for funds distribution, we're going to be collecting an IRS Form W-9 and your bank account information. That is actually done on the website via a system called Plaid. I'll talk about that in a minute at the very end of my presentation. I've got a quick slide on that. So now we've talked a lot about the grants, but we haven't talked about what you can use them for. So this might be important. Your eligible uses of funds. So grants must be used for COVID-19 related expenses incurred between March 1st, 2020 and April 1st, 2021. Now, these are reimbursement grants. These are really to reimburse a business for the expenses they've already incurred as a result of COVID. Now, these might be expenses that you incurred and the business had to try to absorb. These might be bills that are still in arrears that you still have to pay. These might be expenses that the owner had to put more money into the business or personally pay for themselves. This might be expenses that you had to take out a business loan for, any of those sorts of things. These are the qualifying expenses. So payroll costs, all sorts of categories, anything really related to payroll costs for the year, those things qualify for that time period. Commercial rent or mortgage payments on New York-based property. This includes principal payments. Principal is allowable on mortgages. It must be inside those dates, can't be a prepayment of any payments that are due outside of the March 1st, 2020 to April 1st, 2021. A payment of local property or school taxes associated with a business. So if you had property or school taxes associated with your business location, those things are acceptable. Insurance costs, utility costs, costs of personal protection equipment necessary to protect your workers or your consumers. Heating, ventilation, and air conditioning costs. And that's a pretty broad category. That's not only the cost of heating and the cost of air conditioning, but also any other modifications you had to make to the system. Let's say for your HVAC system, you had to get upgraded filters, upgraded filtration. That's all of those are acceptable costs. Other machinery equipment costs. That's also a very broad category. Let's say you were a restaurant and you needed patio heaters. That's upgraded machinery equipment, other machinery equipment as a result of COVID, that's allowable. Extra food warming equipment for to-go orders, that sort of things all would be allowable, along with supplies and materials necessary for compliance with COVID-19 health and safety protocols. So that's going to be things like the Lexan, or the plexiglass, or the plywood, or the rolled plastic, or the stickers you had to put on the floor, or any of the things you needed to do for social distancing. All those types of expenses, they're all allowed. The one ineligible use of funds is you can't use the grant funds directly, or you can't consider this to be a cost to directly repay or pay down a portion of a loan obtained through a COVID-19 federal relief package. So example, you can't use it to pay off your EIDL loan or through a New York State business assistance program. So you can't use it to pay off your New York Forward Loan Fund loan. Other types of loans, of course, are allowed, but what would happen is essentially the business is being reimbursed for these expenses. It's going to free up that money, and then you can reuse that money whichever way you feel you need to, whether it's expansion or whether it's whatever you need to do with it. You can always reuse the money that you already previously spent by replacing it with this grant money. So application certification. There are 4 documents that you have to upload to have your application reviewed. And this is going to be one of them. The applicant certification. This is something you download off the website and sign and then re-upload. This is essentially a document that verifies that you're attesting to the information that I previously mentioned in these requirements. Things like my business is currently open. I reserve the right that I understand that ESD can come back and ask for more information. I'm in substantial compliance with state and federal local laws. My gross receipts are inside these thresholds, so on and so forth. So this is a document that you have to sign. You do have to sign it and re-upload it to the site. There are two ways to do it. You can do it electronically, or you can download the application electronically, or you can sign it electronically, or you can download it, print it out, sign it manually, and then scan it back into the website. Again, I want to point out that this particular document that I'm using for this presentation is available on the website all times in those 13 different languages. So when I get to some of these more technical sections here, like where to click on your screen, I'm not going to go over this because this is really information you're going to want when you're sitting in front of your computer actually doing this, as opposed to trying to hear me talk about it now. So remember that this information as to the step-by-step process, if you need assistance on how to do it, is always going to be available on the website. So again, like I said, you can download it, do it electronically, both ways. So now some tips for applying. We do suggest when you're using the website, you do use Google Chrome. It is designed for Google Chrome. Other browsers will probably work, but Google Chrome will work best. And we also suggest you clear your cache. You use an incognito window. Incognito mode is great because that's going to keep out some of those other different widgets and things you may have downloaded into Chrome that might be sniffing your data. Also, you're going to want to make sure you disable your pop-up blocker, because a lot of times the different screens are going to request confirmations. Those confirmations will come up as pop-ups. So if you can't see the confirmation, it's not going to let you proceed. And again, this document has full instructions on how to clear your cache, how to use incognito mode, how to disable your pop-up blocker. All that information is available in this document. So this document's right on the main page of the site. Tip 5, we ask you submit all your documents in PDF format. When you do upload your documents, they are uploaded as PDFs. If you don't have a scanner, of course, there are many different applications you can use for your smartphone that you can use the camera to scan documents to make PDF files. So there is assistance available in that regard. There are programs like Genius Scan, Adobe Scan that you can use. But please, before you upload it, make sure it's legible. So remember that someone's going to be looking at this, a computer's going to be viewing it. It's going to be you're going to try to mechanically read certain things off the application. So make sure with the application or that the document is eligible, it's not crumpled, it's not misframed, that you can see all the information on the document in the scans. Also, use a valid email address. This should go without saying, but make sure you use an email address that, one, you're going to monitor, that you're going to be able to use, and two, you're going to want to avoid using email addresses that go to your website that might be big open public boxes, things like info at, sales at, support at, admin at. Those types of mailboxes, actually, the Lendistry system, the website, is smart enough not to send emails to those boxes. It's actually going to look at those boxes as a situation for potential fraud. With an $800 million grant program, obviously it is a target for international fraud. So one of the systems that the website uses to as a fraud prevention system is that it keeps from it won't contact those types of email addresses. So use a personal email address if you have to, if you don't have one for the business, or alternatively, you can use one of the free types of mail systems like a Proton Mail or a Yop Mail. You can set up a free email account and always use that for the purposes of this grant. Just make sure whatever you use, you're going to monitor it. Make sure you check your spam folder and so forth, because there is going to be important information sent to you by email. Again, this application system, along with this particular document and most of the other help that we're offering here, is available in 13 different languages. That also includes a non-English language support available at the call center. So you can always get more information on all the different languages this is available in on the New York Small Business Recovery website. So now the application. This is the actual application that you're going to go through in a quick run through of the process. So when you go to the website and you go to begin, there is a Let's Get Started section. There's a button to begin your application. And the first thing it's going to do is when you click that button, it's going to take you to a waiting screen, essentially. It's going to put you in a waiting room, probably only momentarily. If at this point, it's probably only going to be for a matter of a couple of seconds. There's a waiting room built into the system It helps throttle the traffic on the site so that the site doesn't have problems and go down and lose your data and so forth. So just like if you've ever tried to pre-order anything at Christmas time, if you tried to order a PlayStation this year, you know what I'm talking about. This is a sort of system that pauses beforehand so that it's letting people in a controlled manner. Chances are you'll only see the screen for a couple of seconds, but this will come up first, and then it's going to take you into section 1 to begin your application. And this is very straightforward. It's going to look for your name, your phone number, your business name, your zip code, your referral partner. If you're referred by an organization, you're going to want to put that in there along with your preferred language, and an SMS text acceptance policy that you're accepting to receive texts at your owner's cell phone number. I would strongly suggest if you can receive them, you get them, because you're going to get lots of, it's kind of a backup to that email request we're talking about, and you're going to get it a lot faster. Most people check their texts a lot more frequently than they check their emails. So once you hit continue, I said it's going to give you a pop-up box to make sure you consent to the auto dial text message calls from the text policy. And it's going to move on to section 2, which are the owner details. This is the details on the person who's applying right now. So your owner first name, last name, email address, your birthday, social security number, your percentage of ownership, and so forth. And then finally, there's going to be a terms and conditions that you accept, the terms and conditions of the website. You will click the terms and conditions, hit save and agree. It's going to give you a pop-up box to say okay. And then you're going to move on to the actual main meat of the application. What the site's going to do at this moment, once it's got enough information with those 2 sections, it's actually going to generate a user account for you. And that user account you'll get in a separate email, which I'll talk about in a moment, but it's probably going to pop up in your email right after you just did that. The nice thing about that user account is that for some reason you were interrupted in completing the rest of the application, you can go back in. After you complete a section, it moves on. You complete a section, it moves on. You can go back in and resume some of that information. Also, if you get to the end and you choose not to submit it yet because you want to check your answers, you can store it and then use that login information to go back to complete it. So section 3 is your business information. It's going to ask for your business name. It's going to ask if you're using a DBA. If you are using a DBA, you're going to want to put in the name there. If you're not, you'll notice that it asks you to fill in the word none. It's going to be looking for answers for all of these particular questions. And sometimes you'll see that come up. They'll say that if you don't have an answer, you're going to type in none or not applicable. It's going to ask for your business EIN number. That's, of course, important. Your business structure, your state of incorporation, which should be New York. When your business started, the start date of your business is also required on this screen. I'm going to point out here on this business EIN line where it asks for your business EIN, you'll see that all the way to the right of the line, there's a little I with a circle around it. So there's a little highlighted I icon. That's an information bubble. So anytime you run your mouse over that I on the actual website, if you see one of those I's, it's going to give you more information about the question it's asking. So you can always, if you have a question about your business EIN, hover over that and it's going to give you a little pop-up that's going to talk more about what the question is. Also, whenever you see these little carrots, these little down arrows, that of course means you're selecting something off a list. So it's going to give you a list of different business types or a list of different states or a list of counties, for example. So once you've moved, oh, we went too fast. Once we move on to that, we go on to section 4, how we can help. So this is where you're going to fill out what you think you qualify for your grant. Of course, this is based upon what we just talked about as far as how much your gross receipts were for the period and so forth. There's an extra help thing over here where you can click check eligibility. That again is going to give you a little pop-up box again that's going to give you that chart so you can see where you fit. It's going to ask for what you think you'll primarily use the grant for. It's going to ask for your annual gross receipts on your 2019 tax return. It's going to ask if your business was profitable. Of course, the answer there does need to be yes for 2019. It's going to ask how many employees you have, how many part-time employees you have, if you hired anybody in 2020, or if you kept all of your employees during the time period. It's going to ask you that information. That's actually more statistical. It doesn't affect the outcome of the application. Also, you're going to notice on the right side of the screen here near how we can help you. On the other side, you'll see watch video. Each of the sections of this application has a video that you can watch that helps you answer these questions. And those videos are also translated into all the languages with subtitles. So you can always view the video if you have any questions. right in the middle of the application, you can click watch video and it will give you, you can watch the video on how to complete the section to help you walk through completing the section. On to section 5, your business demographics. Here it's going to ask for more information about what your business does. So it's going to ask if you're a business to business business, again, a business that primarily services other businesses, or a business to consumer business, or both. It's going to ask what type of business it is, what industry you're in, whether you sell products. Again, these are from drop-down menus. One of the things it is going to ask you for is your NAICS code. You know, a NAICS code is, if you're not familiar with it, it's a federal system. It's a federal coding system that shows what a business's primary industry is. NAICS codes are self-assigned. So some people will know what their NAICS code is, especially if you are a certified MWBE. You've probably are certified under certain NAICS codes, so you probably know exactly what they are. But a lot of businesses may not know what the NAICS code is. So again, it is a self-assigned code. So if you don't know what it is, you can go to the NAICS code site. There's help there on a NAICS code site, NAICS.com. Put in the type of business that you have, what you primarily do, and it's going to give you back a code, and you can put that code's information in. This is how it's going to sort things by industries and know what the different industries are that are being serviced by the grant. So especially when it comes to the arts and cultural things. So it's going to be important for you to fill out your NAICS code. It is going to request it, going to require it. Also, it's going to ask some demographic information about your business. It's going to ask if you're a woman-owned business, if you're a veteran-owned business, if you're disabled. It's going to ask for your race information, your ethnicity information, if you're a franchisee, or if you're a minority-owned business. And again, those are to help with the distressed business categories to make sure that you get qualification. And remember, for the purposes of this application, you do not need to be certified, and any individual, as long as it's 50% or more ownership, the business falls into that category. Finally, section 6 will be the disclosures. This is actually what helps generate that last document. This is going to ask you to verify that your business is open and operating, that your business is for a for-profit business, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to read through all these questions, but it's a very straightforward list of questions. It's going to ask again for your annual gross receipts and a second spot in the disclosures. It's also going to ask if you received any assistance from an EAC center, or a CDFI, or Chamber of Commerce, or a Small Business Development Center. You want to put that in to give those organizations credit for helping you. It's also going to ask a couple quick questions about whether you are in need of other additional technical assistance or a loan, because potentially we're going to be able to take this information and try to direct you towards other assistance. Finally, section 7 is the confirmation. Once you've gone through and answered all of those questions and you're satisfied with your answers, you can select yes and hit continue, and it's going to submit your application. You can also select no, hit save and continue later. And if you've got a question about something that you've already gone through and answered, you can stop, save your spot, and then go back in and hit yes. Until you hit yes, your application is considered submitted. But I also want to point out that when you hit yes, now it's locked those answers in place, and those answers you cannot change anymore. The only way to change them is to actually contact the 877 numbers, to contact the phone support line, and they can make a correction, which is not a problem, but that's what you have to do. You won't be able to self-correct it yourself on the website. You'll get a confirmation message that you completed your file, that your file has been completed, and now it's time to upload your documents into the portal. And like I mentioned before, in your email, probably already there, you're going to have a username and password for the grant portal. And it has sent this to your email address that you listed before, along with a temporary password. You'll log in using this information. It's going to log you into the portal, where you could either go through and complete that application again, or to go through and complete submitting your application if you hadn't already hit submit, or start uploading your documents. This is a temporary password that it's going to generate. So this it's the first thing it's going to do is actually ask you to change that password. But that is where you upload your documents. And this also gets a little technical, so I'm not going to walk through every single spot here, how to upload your documents. However, it's important to note that through the document portal, to be considered to be selected for a grant to be selected for further processing, you need to have uploaded 4 documents: the applicant certification, your ID, and your business income tax returns for 2019 and 2020. That's the minimum required amount of documentation that you can upload to be selected for a grant. If you don't upload at least that, they can't select your application for a grant. So this screen will come up to tell you what you've uploaded already. Make sure that your business type is listed properly, because it could affect what it shows down below. But again, you'll notice that there are items here with red asterisks and with blue asterisks. Those the 4 items with the red asterisks you must upload. Things with the blue asterisks you can upload if you have them available. If you have your proof of business location and you want to upload it, by all means, go ahead and do it. If you have your NYS 45 and you want to upload it, by all means, go ahead and do it. But it's not required at that moment in time. It's not required at that point in the process. If you are selected, then you may be, then you'll be required to upload those documents. And again, those are via PDF files. And there's some more information on how to upload the documents to the portal. Again, this gets a little technical, so I'm not going to walk through all this. But your documents can be protected by passwords. If you've password protected your PDFs, you can still use them. There's a place in the portal when you go to upload it, it's going to ask if it's password protected, and if it is, that you can securely type in your password for the document so the system can review those documents. Obviously, they need the passwords if they're password protected to open them. But you can leave them password protected if you like, or they don't have to be. That is entirely up to you. Now, finally, linking your banking information. I said your banking information is linked through a technology called Plaid, which is a third-party provider that can allow ACH transfers, allows you to link your bank account information to the website. There are full instructions on how to do this again on the site. You do not need to link your bank account information until it's time to actually get the grant money. So you don't need to collect you don't need to put your bank account information in prior to being selected. It's not necessary. You don't need to put that information out there if you don't feel comfortable with it. It's only when you actually go to receive your ACH transfer of the funds. And again, these are ACH transfers. They don't issue checks. So it will be an electronic transfer into an account. And that is the application deck. So now I'm going to turn my camera back on here and check to see if anyone has any questions. If there are any questions in the chat window or any other questions you might have.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and get us kicked off, Matthew.
Sure.
We did get one question in the chat from Peter. He asked, can the certification be signed electronically by DocuSign?
From what I understand, you can sign it. The certification document can be done online. You can sign it electronically through the website, or you can download it and print it out and re-upload it. So it's not necessarily the DocuSign. I think I'm not super familiar with DocuSign myself, to be honest, but from what I understand, DocuSign is a separate service that you upload the document to sign it. So it's not actually, there's something already built into the website to do it. If you want to sign it electronically, you can sign the certification electronically via the website already.
Thanks, Matthew. Yeah, I just wanted to know if that format of DocuSign was available.
Yep, no, so there is always a way to do it through the website. You don't even need to go to a DocuSign system.
Awesome. Thanks for asking, Peter. Are there any other questions while we have Matthew Kennedy here? There are no bad questions. Also keep in mind that people will be watching this video later, so maybe your question will help someone else that'll watch this later. So no bad questions. The floor is yours.
If some equipment was reimbursed by some other source of funds, let's say a local granting entity like mine, for example, Ithaca Area Economic Development.
Okay.
I didn't see anything that precluded the business from applying for those expenses, even though they've been reimbursed.
Yeah, there are no other grant exceptions. Really, the primary exception is the two that I mentioned. That this restaurant revitalization fund grant is an exception that you can't have received, and you can't have received the Paycheck Protection Program loan over $100,000, again, because that converts into a grant. Anything that's a loan is allowable, and any other type of grant is allowable. So if there were local grants, those are all acceptable. Anything that was done as a local grant through other sources, that those aren't taken into consideration, they're fine.
Thank you.
And there are a couple things I do want to add. I said the 877 number that is here on the screen, that is the main help number that's the main help number for applications. That number is open 8 to 8 Monday through Friday, and that is available in all languages as well. All 13 languages, they have assistance in those languages. And I also want to mention that the way applications are being processed, they're not being processed, they're being processed in batches. So the first batch of selections, what's going to happen is you're going to complete your application. It's going to, once you've uploaded your proper documents, your application is going to show that it's waitlisted, it's waiting to be selected. And they'll process these applications in batches, not necessarily in the exact order they came into the website, because they'll work by regions and by groups and so forth. So the first group of selections, the first applications are going to begin to process. Those selections are expected to start on Monday, the 28th. So that's when probably the earliest that you'll see your grant has been selected. If your grant isn't immediately selected, no worries, because it's probably going to be selected a little bit later. And what's going to happen until you actually receive something that says you're not qualified or all the money is gone, you consider yourself still in the running. And if you've made a mistake, or if there's something that keeps you out from qualifying for some reason, what's going to happen is that Lendistry is actually going to reach out to you to verify that information. So Lendistry is going to check to make sure that you didn't make a mistake. Okay, yes, my gross receipts really are $650,000 for 2020. They're going to check that information beforehand. So before you get excluded, there's going to be that option. Lendistry is going to step in to try to make sure things are as they appear. So don't be concerned if you put in an application and don't immediately hear something. This is the process that the system's going through. That there are going to be many thousands of applications. But don't delay. I would strongly suggest, if you're going to apply, get your information in there. The sooner your information's in there, the better.
Thanks, Matthew.
Sure.
Are there any other questions from anyone else? We have someone here with a ton of knowledge. He's already done a really great presentation, but if there's anything else from anyone, give us a few more minutes to get the questions answered. That's always a sign that you've done an amazing presentation when you answered all the questions before they came up. All right, cool. So we'll end about 5 minutes early here. I first want to thank Matthew Kennedy, Economic Development Program Specialist, Empire State Development. Matthew and I have teamed up a couple times during the pandemic, so he's always a pleasure to have on. So Matthew, thank you for being here. I want to also give a shout out to our partners today for bringing this to you, Chamber Alliance of New York State, as well as Ithaca Area Economic Development here in town. And lastly, to our series sponsor, Tompkins Trust Company, that brings you all of the Chamber's L.E.A.R.N workshops and webinars. Just want to say thank you to everyone for sharing this information. If you have any further questions, you can feel free to call the number that's listed on the screen right now. That's 1-877-721-0097. Did go ahead and I put earlier in the chat the website, but again, that's www.nysmallbusinessrecovery.com. All right. If in the event that you have any additional questions, Matthew, I do have your email. Would you be okay with me emailing you questions that people may have that may not have been here and are watching this video later? Could I shoot you their questions to you, and then you can get it back to me and I'll get it back to them?
Sure. That's not a problem. And remember that, like I said, that the 877 number runs from 8 to 8. So sometimes they can get back to you faster than I might be able to. Also on the website, so this entire document that I just used as this presentation is available at all times. The brand new version of it, the most up-to-date version, is always on the website. And there's an excellent FAQ also on the website. There's a lot of information on the site that answers a lot of people's questions. So there's lots of resources to help you complete your application.
That sounds great. All right. Again, thank you all. I wish you all nothing but the best as we continue to recover from the pandemic. We can do this together. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. You all have a blessed rest of your day, and we'll be in touch soon. All right.
Thank
Bye.
you, David. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you both. Thanks, Matthew. I appreciate it.
Sure, no problem. Have a
All
great
right,
day.
we'll be in touch. You too, buddy. We'll be in touch.